What's up, everyone? Alex Rossman here, and welcome to Rossman Radio, the social first podcast where founders and industry leaders stop pretending everything's amazing and they tell the real stories, the wins, the failures, the why did I even start this moments, all of it. Most importantly, we break down the marketing strategies that are actually working for them today, not the ones some guru made up in a hotel conference room in 2016. So if you want real-world growth strategies told by the ones who have scaled multi-million-dollar brands, just listen.
Today's guest is Lindsay Dahl, Chief Impact Officer at Ritual. If you're not familiar with Ritual, they're one of the most successful and respected supplement brands in the US, known for radical transparency, clinical rigor, and very intentional approach to both marketing and advocacy. But what makes this conversation interesting is not just that Ritual has great branding or great performance, is that they have taken a deliberately not outside of the norm approach to growth. They don't chase every platform. They don't stuff keywords. They don't chase headlines with the brand name in them. Instead, they focus on doing real work in the world and letting the brand follow from that. Today, we'll talk about how that approach actually works, why it is risky, why it's hard, and why it might be the future of how brands earn trust in a very skeptical world. Lindsay, thanks so much for being here and joining us on Rossman Radio.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So one thing that you said that really stuck out with me is that you don't think about really earned media as how do we get our brand name in a headline. You think about it as what stories need to be told. This is very different posture, to be totally transparent, than a lot of the brands that we've talked to and worked with. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I think so. In order to get earned media, you have to be doing interesting things, especially in today's world. And if you're doing interesting things, especially from a business platform, I think you have a lot of rich stories that you're sitting on. And so our approach at Ritual has really been, especially in today's world where earned and paid media is getting more and more blurred. People are starting to realize that you can see a brand's name in a headline and not really sure if it's someone that's writing about it, or maybe if that was a pay for play type of article. And so I think our big approach is not about, I was thinking about what's best for Ritual, but how can our brand shape culture? And so what we mean by that is if we think about women's health, since we are focused on women's health supplements, there's a lot of need states within women's health that are underserved and undermet. And so our kind of North Star as a business is really about solving key safety and efficacy gaps as it relates to women's health. And the byproduct of that is that we're thinking really differently about the ingredients and the transparency around those ingredients. We're thinking differently about the clinical rigor that we bring to our products. And so instead of just always trying to pitch, Ritual has a new peer-reviewed clinical study on this different product, we're really thinking about we think a more interesting story to tell, maybe is a better way to phrase it, is why aren't human clinical trials required on supplements before they hit the marketplace? And so whether it's our social media or it's earned media, we always try to think about what are the stories that we want to learn about and read. And typically it's not like the first thing that comes out of our mouths. It's not like, oh, I want to hear about what brand X is doing X. It's like these juicier stories. And so that type of strategy has paid off. And honestly, journalists and editors appreciate it because all they get pitched all day is brands trying to make headlines. And so it's also a breath of fresh air for the people that we're pitching to be like, oh, they're actually really bringing me a story that is interesting and something that I can sink my teeth into.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly a really healthy approach to it. I think what we often get lost in is the bottom of funnel or just pure sales revenue. What are my year-over-year results? What is the bottom line? And I think that's certainly useful when looking at the books, but in the end, the long-term strategy needs to be creating a product that is fulfilling a need that's not in the market, which I think Ritual does a really good job at. And I think you inadvertently have kind of stumbled into something that is, SEO friendly and effective. If you want to be totally craven about it, is that you're doing product related research and development and publishing things that are fulfilling those needs, but you're doing it from an authoritative place. Like there's things that you're doing that other brands aren't doing, and that puts you in a position of having that information that people are seeking out in that way. And that leads me to the next thing that I think you touched on already. But you publish when you have something meaningful to say and when customers are actually asking for it. And I think those are two really, really unique things that I don't want to, glance right past. Why has that been the right choice for you? Or can you give me an example maybe about um, what customers in your research and in your audiences have been asking for and how you fulfilled that need?
Yeah. I think, when customers are shopping for supplements, they're asking two key questions when they walk down the aisle or they're kind of browsing the internet. Is this safe for me and is it going to work? And those are real questions that we have as a team as well. It's why our founder started this business, because she saw real safety and efficacy gaps. And those safety and efficacy gaps come from the fact that there's very little oversight of supplements. The last major update was in 1994, the year that Friends aired. And the market has absolutely exploded in the last 30 years. And so we think about solving these two issues within the supplement industry through the lens of women's health and key need states. So if you think about something like heavy metals and protein powder, there's been, Consumer Reports has published new testing on this last fall. There's been ongoing news cycle. But we launched our protein powder. We started with vanilla. We just launched chocolate because it took us 3 years to find a cocoa supplier, knowing the increased risks for human rights and for heavy metals within cocoa. And we started talking about heavy metals and plant-based protein powder when we launched our vanilla protein. And this was before the news cycle was really churning. And a lot of people were like, well, why are you, even internally, we had questions from people that were like, well, why are we proactively talking about this? This isn't necessarily a good story to tell. And, we want to know, we knew at the time, people were already thinking about contaminants like heavy metals and pesticides and plasticizers. And so it's our job. And we think what makes Ritual special is staying ahead of the curve. So knowing where those early questions are for where the next part of the market's going to go and hitting it head on. And so we've been publishing our heavy metal test results on the PDPs of our protein powder for years now, and not just cherry picking a study here or there. Anytime we produce a new lot, a new set of results goes up. And that type of transparency still to this day is unprecedented in the protein powder industry. And again, we think that our consumers and people that are attracted to Ritual are going to appreciate the transparency. We also tell the stories of how heavy metals get there, how brands can do better by managing them. And again, that is really rich storytelling that people actually learn from us and with us in the same way that you want not just a product that's going to taste good and deliver its results. You also want companies that are pushing the industry forward.
I'm sure that for any brands, especially newer, startup companies, and we get, Ross, I think we get a lot of inquiries from new supplement brands or, people that want to get started, I think, who are probably good intention, but I'm sure all of them want to know, how do you find the information to stay ahead of the curve if you don't have an existing customer base? Because right now, I'm sure you learn a ton from the amount of feedback you get from your own customers. When you were just starting out, how did you determine, what sources did you go to find where the demand could be in the next few years? What was your strategy there?
Yeah. I give a lot of credit to our founder and CEO. And if you've got a CEO or a founder who naturally is seeing where the market's going to go, that is the kind of holy grail. I think it's really hard. A lot of market research is great, but it's almost old news by the time it becomes market research. And so a lot of it is kind of art and science mixed together. Same from my experience in the beauty industry. I was previously at Beauty Counter prior to Ritual for 8 years. And again, that was a white space of knowing before clean was a thing. At the time when the business launched, it was really focused on natural. Again, that was a founder and CEO that saw that white space. But I think at the end of the day, it's not just about the founder and CEO. You need a team of people under you who live, breathe, know the market and product segment you're in. It doesn't mean they have to come from that particular industry. It means they need to know the psychographic of who it is that you think your core customer is. And if they know that, then they're inherently going to know something like openly sharing heavy metal test results is going to be a win, not something that our customers are going to be afraid of.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think what you said about having a founder in this space too is very, very valuable. One thing that we talked about previously that I think would be interesting here, because we get a lot of as an advertising agency, we get a lot of questions about how can I get started on Amazon, or how can I get started with wholesale, or in different big box retailers and everything. And I feel like that's kind of skipping a step. I know that Ritual built your D2C business first and prioritized that with building the brand and the relationships before moving into those other sandboxes. Why was that sequencing so important for you guys?
We really wanted to do things intentionally. So that's both with our product and our sales strategy. So unlike a lot of brands within the supplement or in the beauty space where you're just churning out products every single year, for example, the first 4 years, we had 2 products on the market, our multivitamin and then our prenatal. That is a very kind of counter approach to the traditional mindset of like, let's try to build and flood the market with as many products as possible. So we wanted that same kind of intentionality around really building our core D2C business. And it really paid off. It honestly, we spent years building the foundations from both a product and just like the functionality and relationship with our subscriber base, that the transition to full omni-channel, first in Whole Foods, Amazon, and then Target, was highly successful. And that was because there was so much brand recognition and love and trust already from the years of investment that we had done from the D2C side of things. And so I just think it's a really important note that just kind of trying to chase whatever the revenue dollars are or expanding too quickly, either from a product or from a sales channel perspective, for most businesses can be something where suddenly you have a really large headcount to support that, but you haven't built the foundations of a really sustainable business, which is needed to make sure that these transitions to retail can go smoothly. So thankfully, we were not sure. It wasn't like we were a guaranteed shoe-in for a mass retailer like Target, given our premium price point. They really took a chance on us. And ultimately it paid off, again, because of that intentional investment in building our D2C business first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the building that foundation is critical. I think we get, the same thing that, kind of that you were touching on. We also get a lot of brands who have become overly dependent on one of those channels, or if they get on Amazon or they get on something like that, they become, that is their entire business. And then by the time they want to make better margins, the opportunity just isn't there to do so because that foundation hasn't been built already. There's no email lists outside of what's already been purchased from Amazon. And then you're heavily dependent on those sandboxes for your entire business, which is not a place that you want to be, but a place that I'm sure a lot of people can identify given the ubiquity of the Amazons and Walmarts and even Whole Foods of the world.
Yep.
You mentioned something about your advocacy work, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think that's unique to you. And you've touched on the R&D and those things before, but can you talk a little bit about your advocacy work and how you're sort of pushing the culture around your types of supplements further, in terms of regulation for supplements and why that's almost unheard of, really, in your space?
Yep. So my background is in policy and specifically banning toxic chemicals from consumer products. So toxic chemical pollution in our air and water and products. And it's a tool book that I brought to Beauty Counter and now to Ritual, obviously different for different businesses. But ultimately, Ritual is asking for more oversight of our industry. We're asking for health protective heavy metal limits on supplements and protein powders. We're asking for the term clinically studied to be better defined, because right now it's widely being misused in the marketplace and kind of confusing consumers. And it's unprecedented and in some cases makes us unpopular within the industry. But at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. So there's only so many people we can touch from Ritual as a brand and a business. And we know at the end of the day, and part of our founder and CEO's vision was really to help solve these safety and efficacy problems within the industry. And the best way to do that is both through the market, through our products, and also through policy. So we think the American consumer deserves to have more confidence in the supplements that they're purchasing. Their skepticism is warranted, and a stronger federal oversight system can really help with that. So Ritual helped, I testified in California. We helped pass a bill in California to require heavy metal testing transparency for prenatal vitamins. Since it passed in the state of California, it becomes essentially a de facto national bill since companies are selling into California, and that information is going to be made publicly available. And at the end of the day, it was really about what does our business want to stand for? And we want to stand for helping move the industry in the right direction. And I think it's a toolbox that should be only approached by businesses if they're willing to hire someone with expertise in advocacy. I've seen a lot of well-intended founders that think it's kind of cool to do advocacy work. Corporate activism looks like it's in vogue. And really, it just becomes a marketing exercise, and then it falls flat because the consumer can really tell the difference between the authentic roll up your sleeves lobbying work that it takes versus sending your CEO to Capitol Hill to catch some selfies.
That was leading me into my next follow-up on that one, because I think I've read a lot of studies from, in fairness, from the advertising channels that talk about cause-driven marketing, especially around, gift-giving seasons. There is a strong preference for consumers to buy from brands that they align with their own, whether it's just their ethical beliefs, political beliefs, or their what they're willing to stand for in terms of their principles. And people are much more likely to buy from a brand that they align with there. But I think you make a good point here, and this goes back to really building a brand, and it's easier said than done, but building a brand from the ground up with a strong foundation and with something that actually backs up what you're putting out there. A lot of brands want to do good, but they treat it like a branding layer or a marketing exercise instead of a real operational commitment. And this is something that you can say without naming any brands, but what are red flags you see when a brand is being performative versus actually serious about this? You mentioned not having someone on board with legitimate policy experience. Is there anything else that stands out to you in terms of brands that maybe all talk and don't actually do the work behind the scenes?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Greenwashing, clean washing, advocacy washing, whatever you want to call it, I think it mostly comes from a place of naivete. And I say that for new businesses. Yes, we have a lot of examples of corporate giants intentionally greenwashing their new plastic such and such. But for kind of startup or mid-sized brands, especially those that are founder-led, I have so many colleagues across industries that, they're sometimes 2 to 6 years into their business, and their focus is around ingredient safety, it's around advocacy, it's around sustainability, and they don't have a single person on staff that has expertise in any of those 3 areas, which are all very different. That's the number one red flag to me. And a CEO's passion is not enough. These are very technical fields, especially if that's what you're going to build your business around. You need someone to help guide you in the right direction. So that's my first red flag. I can look up on LinkedIn a bunch of brands that I love that have some sort of cause at the center of their businesses, and they don't have a single person on staff that really knows this. And yet you're going to find most of those CEOs are hiring someone that has social media expertise or digital chops or capabilities. And so it's interesting that people don't find the same kind of technical rigor needed in order to really deliver on those causes. The second is I think on the red flag versus green flag is when you do that, those are the brands that have lasting power. Those are the memorable brands that people can cite off the tip of their tongue to be like, oh, I really remember how Patagonia changed the fashion industry. 7th generation put eco-friendly products on mass shelves, back when it used to be kind of stuck on the co-op lower shelf. You can think of these brands, and those are the brands that really have invested in people that know how to do this. So that's definitely the first red flag. The second is if all of this work really comes from the marketing department, it should first come from everything from how you design your product. So you should have sustainable thinking around packaging in the early phases of design and packaging selection. Again, a lot of people, it's an afterthought of once the product is developed, you get the marketing team at the table to be like, oh, what are the cool stories we can tell versus how are we going to make this product different? naturally you're just going to have a treasure trove of really interesting things from a product and brand marketing perspective. So that's kind of the second thing, that if the marketing team is leading this exercise, another huge red flag. I think those are kind of the two biggest buckets. But then the third one is often underlooked, which gets to corporate governance and accountability. Thinking about who's on your board. Do you have anyone within this space that has that expertise on your board or within your executive team? And making sure it's a part of your strategic planning process, because you can have all the vision in the world, but if you're not actually baking this into your strategic planning, you're not going to get the budget dollars for it, and then it's not going to be sustainable. So those are the kind of three things that I think are really important for brands. And honestly, still to this day, I think most brands miss all three of those across the board when they're starting a cause-led business.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's really valuable. I think that we try to emphasize this, and I've tried to emphasize this with other guests on the show, and what they've, I think that the most successful brands that we've talked to, including Ritual, have approached things very organically and with a willingness to do the work. And it is harder, and it is more difficult to hire the right people and to get the necessary experience to put your money where your mouth is. But in the end, those brands end up being more successful because they truly do have the foundation laid that puts them in a place to succeed.
Can I jump in on there for a second, Rob? I think, I'm a little smug about this, but I do think business school does a disservice in the branding of sustainability is a nice to have, not a need to have. And you could swap any word for sustainability in there related to a cause. People think sustainability, safety, advocacy equals expensive. And I actually think that's a total miss if you approach it thinking about, oh, this is just going to be something that costs more, or makes it harder for us to bring products to market. Because the intentionality around us making those decisions early on, from the time that Ritual launched, has actually been the foundation to us being now the number one in trust within the industry. And all of that it actually makes our marketing dollars more efficient. It makes our storytelling easier. It makes our conversion and loyalty within our customer base so much better. And those are all very clear financial metrics. And so I'm also trying to get people to realize that investing, and this is why a lot of people aren't hiring one single headcount. But I just, again, think that you're financially shooting yourself in the foot by taking this outdated business school talking point and applying it to today's business world.
Completely. And I think it depends on, like you mentioned, I kind of chuckled a bit about, if the marketing team is running those efforts. And I was like, yeah, it's to a certain degree, you can't really trust the marketers with that advocacy work and with the more substantial work. But I do think it's it's smart business to do things the right way, this way. Like you said, in the end, it's going to benefit the people who are doing these things the right way. And it's better marketing to do things that are more sustainable for the business long term. And I think that those two things should work hand in hand instead of as an oil and water, opposing forces. You can have good marketing by doing quality work and approaching things the right way. And in many cases, it's the better approach than to just chasing bottom of the line sales and looking at things strictly from a business perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So last question, if you zoom out, 5 years, what do you think is something consumers will expect from brands in your industry, in the supplement, space, that they don't necessarily today? Where is the industry headed in terms of, the sort of, I guess, the new gold standard for your types of brands?
I think number one, consumers in the supplement space are really going to expect human clinical trials on finished goods. So the whole product, not just individual ingredients within a formula. And people want to know that the money that they're spending, whether it's $10 or $60 a bottle, is actually proven. And then second, I think people are going to really expect, and it's going to be mainstream to expect test results to be handed over to consumers across a variety of different contaminants. And that's very scary for a lot of brands. Testing is hard to not only conduct, but also to translate to consumers. And unfortunately, I feel like the the cat has already left, the bag, and some people are responsible in how they talk about and report on test results, and others are not. And so it's really behooves brands, especially those in the space, whether it's beauty or something that's ingested like a supplement, to really get ahead of the curve and own your communications about your approach to third-party testing and contaminants and how you manage those. Because I think human clinical trial and an unprecedented focus on safety is really going to be where people and consumers are. I think at the end of the day, we know that when we first launched, our CEO always says, she was like, it was the trust me era of wellness, where companies could just sell whatever and people were trusting what they were putting in their body. And now we've really shifted to the prove it era of wellness, which is customers are like, wait, no, prove it to me that this product is what it says it is and the ingredients are there, that's on the label. And I think, again, brands that embrace that, I need to prove it and over explain, use a lot of copy in ways that we maybe traditionally haven't, are really going to be the ones that win in the supplement space.
Couldn't have said it better. I think that even from a marketing perspective, we've seen everyone chasing Reddit and going after more authoritative sources other than your traditional SEO slop that populated Google for years and years and years. People do want actual information on what is actually in what they're taking, and then they want it verified, and they're going to be looking for that social proof in a way. So online reviews and product reviews and what people are saying about it in online communities, forums, these kind of things are what people are trusting more and more versus your traditional blog articles. So having that work put in now will be beneficial to everyone, even in the age of zero-click searches and AI SEO. The more facts you have about what you're selling, the better, because it's going to get crawled in a way that it traditionally hasn't. So I think that it's been rewarding talking to you, and I hope it's been valuable for our listeners to hear a little bit behind one of the more successful brands in this space. So Lindsay, genuinely one of my favorite conversations so far. Thanks for being so thoughtful, honest, and really practical about this.
Yeah, it's been awesome to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks. And for anyone listening, if you want to see what this looks like when it is done well, go to ritual.com, not just for the products, but for how they show up, in the space and in the world. Lindsay, thanks again so much. Hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Thank you.